Hey everyone, welcome back. We're here again to share with you today a new recipe, a Festbier recipe that I had done for a, well, I would say recent Oktoberfest party, but now considering that I'm filming this at the end of 2022 and the party was at the beginning of October, I can't say recent, but I did throw once upon a time earlier this year for Oktoberfest and for my 50th birthday, honestly, a dual party, basically, an Oktoberfest and birthday party combined, where I made a bunch of German foods, invited a lot of people over, and most importantly, for the sake of this video, I brewed 20 gallons of homebrew for this party. I brewed 10 gallons of a traditional Märzen style Oktoberfest beer that here in the United States, that's what just about everyone here in the US considers to be Oktoberfest beer. Because I was going to host a lot of people, I wanted to make them happy, but I also wanted to do a Festbier, which is the more modern, or is the modern replacement for that Märzen style that they serve now at the Oktoberfest in Munich, I suppose, today, right? It's a Festbier. It's a little different. It's similar but different. It's a little lighter in color, a little bit more bitter. Not bitter, but a little bit more bitter, less malty, I should say, than the traditional Märzen. So there's some differences. I brewed 10 gallons of each, right? And 20 gallons, that's about 4 corny kegs, exactly 4 corny kegs actually. And they all got knocked out by the end of the night. So apparently they were not bad beers, either one of them. But I want to just let you know, for those who are curious, as if they've never had a Festbier before, that was the preferred beer at the party, and it kind of reflects why, even in Germany, why the modern Festbier is the new standard of Oktoberfest beer than the traditional Märzen style, because it appeals more to the masses. It really does. Those kind of people that that drink domestic beer here in the U.S., like Miller, Budweiser, Coors, and the like, right? They were quickly converted to this Festbier style, to the point where some of them probably should have drank as much as they did, including myself, by the way, quite frankly. I had a good time. This video is about the Festbier part of that party, and I wanted to share with you that recipe because it did get I got a lot of great feedback. Now, you get a lot of polite feedback from some folks who are just being nice, and some of them are being genuine when they say they really like beer A or beer B, but when you actually can watch them without them seeing you go back to the same beer and refill time and time again, that's a pretty sure sign that they like that given beer style. And the Festbier recipe was the more preferred one from all the anecdotal comments I got from people at the party and after, even as recently as yesterday, 3 months later, I got somebody still wanting to comment on that Festbier, asking for the recipe. So here it is today, right? So what I have here, I got a couple recipes in. Of course, this is how I do my recipes normally, right, guys? I actually put the recipe files in the video description, right? So if you're watching this video and you want to follow along, go to the video description and download. I'll have a PDF and my original spreadsheet version here for you to go download and look at. If you're going to brew this, I would suggest using my spreadsheet, since it's got all the math and calcs built in, and you can enter in your losses and attributes and all your brew system properties in there and predict a pretty good beer like I did here, right? In fact, the way I brewed it, the way I designed it, the way I brewed it, came out very close to one another. And it's just my suggestion to you. Use whatever brew system or calculator that you want, but that's why I'm putting both links there for you. I will also post my Märzen recipe also there for you too, for contrast, in case you want to brew that. Quite frankly, I like this new Märzen is a variation of one I did a few years ago. I did a video on a few years ago. Upon reflection, I made some tweaks to this recipe, and I think I preferred my original one better, so I'm not going to talk up this one so much. The reason why I didn't much care for this year's Märzen recipe is that it was very similar to the Festbier that I brewed, because I shared some of the common grains and things, and I brewed them both side by side on 2 different brew systems concurrently. So it was a lot of things to keep up with. So I didn't deviate too much, and so as a result, they were very similar to one another. The Festbier, again, being a little bit more, slightly more bitter and lighter in color, and the Märzen being a little more malty and slightly darker in color, just to let you know. So going into the details here, let's see here. So the Festbier, as you know, or maybe not know, it's just maybe why you're watching this, it's largely a very simple grain bill. It's the majority of it, well, actually, I'd say the plurality of it in my okay, so just to tell you here, normally this is done with full Pilsen malt as the majority base grain bill, with in my case some Vienna malt for some influence here. But since I didn't have more than 10 pounds of Pilsner malt, and I had plenty of my base malt that I have laying around, my basic 2-row pale malt, I actually had to substitute some of that in there. But maybe I'll stick with this formula because it apparently was very popular as it was brewed. And I also added a percentage of Vienna malt in there, which is pretty large percentage, actually, about equal to the other grains. So, but that was a good combination, giving a nice color to it as well. For the hop bill, I used some Magnum as my boil hops because it's a high alpha acid hops, and all I needed was some bitterness, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money on a bunch of ounces of hops when I could just use a single ounce of hops and get the bitterness I wanted. But then for the flavor and aroma, I reverted back to the traditional Hallertauer Mittelfrüh for both the flavor and the aroma additions. Now, another thing I did, because I was throwing a traditional Oktoberfest party, and I made traditional German foods. I even bought imported ingredients for all the foods and stuff that I made as well. I also carried that forward with the beer. So I went to extra lengths to make sure I purchased imported grains, except for one exception here with my base malt, like I mentioned before, being thrown in. But the hops are all German hops. The grain bill's all German grain. I made some adjustments to my water as well, because here where I live, I have Lake Michigan water, very soft water, really great for lagers. I had to make some water adjustments there, and a little lactic acid to bring down the mash pH a little bit better too. For the yeast, I couldn't find the actual yeast strains I would normally use for one of these beers, but I did substitute a local yeast supplier, Omega Yeast, here in Chicago. They have a German Bach yeast that I substituted, and apparently it was a hit because it worked out great. So maybe I'll stick with that going forward. And when it comes to the mash schedule, if you watch my channel for any length of time, you might realize that I'm pretty much a single infusion mash kind of guy. There's not a whole lot of need to do step mashing. Since I wanted to be more traditional, again, I'm trying to do an Oktoberfest themed party, I just went ahead with a step mash schedule anyway, just to ensure if there's any flavor differences that would come out of any of these. I just wanted to make sure I covered all my bases, because I was serving beer for a party of over 80 people. I didn't want to take any chances with like skipping any of the traditional steps. And because Festbier is a lager, I had to make it lager style. So of course the choice was to do a traditional cold fermentation and lagering, which I did not have. I had about maybe 5 weeks start to finish before the party started, from when I brewed it to when I served it. So what I've been doing for the past few years, as those of you who watch my channel know, I do a lot of pressure fermentation, so I took advantage of that again. I pressure fermented this for 2 weeks under 15 psi at, for me, what I call room temperature. Now here in my basement where stuff was fermenting, it's usually in the mid 60s, but during the summertime it was around 70 degrees in this case. Didn't get any off flavors, at least any undesired off flavors. Obviously, because the beer turned out great, I wasn't concerned about that at all. And to clarify it, I used gelatin fining like I tend to do with my lagers or my lighter colored beers, and it worked out great. And of course, then I racked to some kegs, carbonated them, chilled and carbonated concurrently, and I was ready to serve. Festbier is now in the official BEER-N-BBQ by Larry archives. I'm going to keep this around. I'll definitely brew it for next year. maybe alongside another beer as well. Maybe next time it'll be a Dunkel. I love Dunkels too. I love other fall beer styles, but that's another topic for other videos to handle. So go out, brew on, make the Fest beer. I think you'll enjoy it as well. And if you've been watching around to this point, thanks for watching. And any questions, let me know down below in the comments, and I will talk to you next time.
Und ich flieg, flieg, flieg wie ein Flieger, bin so stark, stark, stark wie ein Tiger und so groß, groß, groß wie eine Giraffe, so hoch. Oh, oh, oh. Und ich spring, spring, spring immer wieder und ich schwimm, schwimm, schwimm zu dir rüber und ich nehm dich bei der Hand, weil ich dich mag. Und ich sag, heute ist so ein schöner Tag. La 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 la. Heute ist so ein schöner Tag. La 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 la. Heute ist so ein schöner Tag. La